Morning, guys. If you've been following along on our Instagram this morning, we've been talking a little bit already about props and what we do and what we pick. But for those who haven't, I'm Cassie from Captured Moments by Cassie Lou, and this is our part 2 series on top tips with Cassie Lou. And I decided that probably the biggest stuff I get asked is props. How do I pick them? What do I look for? Pretty much just specific stuff about lots of the stuff I use. So I thought today I would focus on trying to narrow down. I have a lot of props because it's sort of an addiction, but that's another story. So I thought I would pick sort of the key elements of some of the stuff that I pick and why I pick it, what I look for, and things that are actually a turn off for props that I select not to use. So in the studio today, we have a nice selection to talk through. So I thought while I'm also talking about some of the props, I'll do a little bit of a chat about some of the stuff that sort of goes hand in hand with sessions and the props themselves. So let me rewind back 9 years when I first opened my photography studio. We were renting at the time, so that meant that I had very limited space to store stuff. I didn't actually have a set studio. I photographed in our lounge room, which meant when a client booked, I would bring everything out of storage, set it all up, have the client come, do the session, pack it all down, store it back. And that was a mammoth job. It took a lot of effort, and a couple of years in, I actually had an assistant work with me, and she was a lifesaver because she stayed a bit longer and helped me do the mammoth job of packing it all down. So basically what that meant for me is that I just tried to limit going too overboard with too much options because I just didn't have the space. We had stuff in our laundry being stored. We actually had a second toilet area that we just didn't use, blocked off, and actually used that as a storeroom. We had stuff in my walk-in robe, stuff under my bed. Like, it just got to the point that it was a little bit ridiculous. So that kind of limited me for a while in being able to buy a lot more and, trying to keep up with the trends and what people were selling. So yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. But what that meant is it just made me be more creative, I guess, because I had to go with, okay, well, what about wraps? They're easier to store. What kind of colors can I do? What textures can I add? What layers can I put in? What extra details can I put in without obviously having the bulkier props, because the reality is I just couldn't store anymore. So really all I started with in the first place was a basket. Something round, something squared is pretty well what I started with. I was doing some mentoring under another photographer at the time with Lucy, and she was great at letting me borrow and try different props, so I could have a little bit of difference every now and then. She'd bring it to a session for me, and then I would drop it back to her. And that was also really cool to sort of see what I enjoyed photographing with, I guess, and sort of see, okay, well, if I'm going to invest in something, what's going to be well-rounded and what's really not going to be that efficient for me. So way back, I started with something, I think this would have probably been my first ever round prop, I believe. And then I bought some props that I no longer have because they were just not functional for me, or they were really big and babies would just get sort of lost in them. I did search for probably a good 2.5 years to find just a brown crate. I felt like that was a really sturdy prop that I could also use actually out on my family sessions as well as newborns. So I remember one day I saw this, I think it was like an ad or something on Facebook come up with this antique shop way out north. And anyway, they said, make us an offer, come down, have a look. And they showed sort of a bit of a snippet. And I remember seeing this crate, and it was just like heaven aligned because there was this crate that I had been looking for years. So I actually called them and said, look, can you put some of your crates aside because I'm going to have a big drive. Don't want to get there and you've got none left. So they were brilliant, and they actually put a couple aside for me to come and have a look at. And I was pretty much at the point that I would have paid anything. So I probably overpaid for the crate that I have, but I still have it, still use it, still love it. It still goes between my newborn and my family sessions. So, something like that was a really good investment for me, I guess. And then this little crate over here is something that I've had for yonks. It's not super sturdy. So I actually can't take this to sessions with families because if a little one sits on this, they will literally fall through. So for me, this has become like a baby goes in or like toddler sort of sits in this, and that's pretty well all it's used for. It's really actually light, even though it looks heavy, it's super light. But what that means is it's really easy to use for sessions. And I'll be honest, I actually use this a lot for birthday parties. This has become our cliche cake table for my kids' birthday parties lately. Anyway, let me start with what I look for in a prop, and then I can show you guys some of the props that I have. So basically, when I'm looking for a prop, I want to look for something that has a sturdy element. Now, it can be a light prop, but if it's sourced correctly and is made well, and vendors are generally really good. If you're buying from somebody who actually specifies in newborn photography, they are generally sourcing products that are suitable for this genre of photography, I guess. So a few of my well-used props are circle props. Love circle props because for babies who like to be curled up nice and snug, essentially like being in the womb, I guess, love the round props, because if you look at a round prop, generally I'll position a baby's head and they'll just sort of beautifully curl into a prop. So this is actually a prop that most parents at my sessions will say, can I take that home? The baby looks so comfy and they are sleeping beautifully in here. Now this is essentially, it's just a wire basket that's been felted and well stuffed and lined. Now I actually add additional stuffing and different elements to support baby better, but I can explain that. So what I do, and I actually had somebody ask me on my Instagram stories what I use to support babies underneath your layers. I use a lot of like felty, like this is just a little felt fabric. So what I do is I try and create what I know will be a good support for baby's head, because remembering that their airway is key to making sure that they are breathing safely whenever you're posing, because if you've got baby's head too far forward, too far back, you're actually obstructing their airways, and their airways are very thin and very little. So making sure that you're actually well supporting their neck means that you're keeping baby safe. So what I generally do is I work out in a prop where I'm going to have baby's head, and then what I'll do from there, I'll build up, and I also make sure I'm keeping baby's head off of, like this is metal, so we don't want baby's head to touch this at all because that's not safe and it's too hard. So what I'll do is I'll create sort of like an inner nest look for baby, and then it's really easy. All you're doing is burying it in what all of your filling is. So you don't actually see anything like that, and it's actually well supported for baby. And then generally when I'm popping babies in something like this, it's just a matter of baby from last week. Now this baby doesn't pose the same as how I would sort of pose a newborn per se, but this baby's a lot smaller. So what I generally do is I support baby's head well, and then baby kind of generally will sort of curve a little bit into the prop, making sure baby's face is up, making sure baby's neck is supported, and that there's no forced crunching or too far back. And that also plays part in the angles that you photograph, which I'll cover in another session. But basically you want baby to be well supported. And you're also looking for props that are sturdy. So if a baby's going to flinch, are they safe? Now, if you're using a prop that your answer would be no, then you have an assistant or a parent whose hands are always on baby. And then you use Photoshop and things like that to alter. So that's a round prop. The other thing I'll do with round props is when I've put a lining in, so let's say we're going to go, again, felt. So this is a bit of a bigger piece, and what I'll do in a round prop sometimes is create more of a sort of curved, as you can see there, sort of a curved spot. Then I'm going to pop some layering on that, and that's sort of what baby's going to sit in. Little cushions. Now you can make these yourself. You don't have to purchase them from a vendor. You could do this yourself. Or if you're like me and are time poor, then you buy them already done. And they're a beautiful little thing. They're made beautifully for little babies' heads. And I would just place that on top and then place baby in. Again, making sure that their neck is well supported and their head's not too far forward or too far back. Now for sizing what I pick with props. So first of all, like I said before, I pick something that's sturdy and something that I feel like is going to be safe for babies. Now, if you've ever seen a newborn photographer in a shop like Kmart or Target or a homewares place and you see them picking up props, you'll notice one thing we do, and we do this, and we go elbow to hand. Most babies are generally this sort of length. So for me, if I have a prop, I go, yeah, okay, baby will actually fit comfortably in here. And we always know that babies aren't laying flat on props. They're quite often propped up a little bit anywhere. So I know something like this would actually give me a lot of room to move. It's also really sturdy. So I know that babies aren't going to tip. Now I even sometimes do on hands tummy poses in something like this. And again, it's just making sure that when baby's at the lip of the prop, it's actually not touching this. It's well supported and it's propped up. Something like this, that is quite a lot deeper. So again, I can see, okay, it's going to be a little bit trickier, which means I'm going to have to prop baby on an up angle or on hands, which means they're sort of buried in and coming out. So what I would do with anything like this, that babies are going to be higher in a prop, actually I do it with most, unless they're on the ground in a prop, is a small weight. So my husband's got a collection of weights out in the carport, so I actually just pinch his discs that go on the barbell, and I actually pop a disc in here because we don't want baby to counterbalance. Now, if you think about a baby, their heads are always bigger, heavier than their body, and they have no control. So when I'm placing a baby in here, we're also keeping assistant or parents or myself really close or hands on baby, especially if we're, baby's leaning over the front of this prop. But what it means by having the weight in is it's going to counterbalance a bit. So baby's head's not going to tip the baby out because it's counterbalanced, which means we're positioning baby and supported, but it actually means that the baby's weight is distributed more evenly with the help of the hand weight. So that's pretty much all I look for in round. I don't love super shallow. That brown one is probably the most shallow I have. I do prefer a little bit of depth. So something, as you can see, that you've got a bit more depth. I don't have a set specific, it's got to be this deep or I won't use it. Generally by looking at it, I can tell if it's something I can use. And again, width is the same. Fits nicely in there. And this has actually got beautiful, less angled edges, which actually makes it really easy to pop bubs in these props. Props like these ones are becoming my most commonly requested and used props because these are also actually fantastic for little sitter sessions. Again, props like this, I always pop a weight in the bottom unless I'm just putting baby on their back. If I'm popping baby on their back, then I feel like that's a safer. If they're going to go on their stomach, I always have a weight just because for me, that's just a no-brainer. Again, layering. So I will always use some kind of bigger blanket underneath for newborns, only because it's such a deep prop. Bubs will get lost and this will be higher than the baby's face. Using a filler, and I love texture. I love something that gives my photos a little bit, texture I guess is what it is. And what I'll do, same thing as if I can't use this alone to sort of support baby's head the way I want baby to sit, I just use wraps. I have so many wraps, as you can see here. And I have wraps in every color, every tone pretty well. So what that means is anything I'm using, I've got something to pop underneath. Sometimes I'll even use one of my cushions. If it's going to be a bigger, deeper prop, this just is actually a really, it's soft but firm. So popping that underneath actually creates a beautiful spot for baby's head to go on. So these are, love them. So anything more about this one? No, I think that's about it. Again, I like to have the width as close to this point as I can because I know that it will work for babies. When it comes to square, I got a few different sorts of things I use. Like I said, this one I used heaps as well as a basket when I first started. I generally don't use my bigger rectangle ones as much, but I think that's also, I just hashed them out for years that I just got a little board maybe of using them. They're great for building up. Like sometimes what I'll actually do is use something that's like this, and I'll actually I've got a beautiful round prop that fits into these and build it up with some plants or some kind of decor and create like this becomes part of the scene, not as specifically the actual prop the baby's in. But if you're starting out, literally something rectangled that a baby can fit in and something round, and you just literally had 2 props, you can easily start with something like that, because all you need to do is have 2 different varieties. You can change things up with the different ways you're posing baby, and change it up with different wraps. You can have vast variety with textures and what you put under baby, what you wrap baby in, little outfits you put baby in, how you pose baby in those. And especially if you're just starting out and you're learning a lot more about safety and posing, keeping it just to a couple of props. And I found for me when I first started, if I tried too many things, it just got overwhelming. And I just felt I just couldn't master specific things because I was trying so many things. So what I did is I really tried to master, okay, how do I want to pose baby in a prop like this? How is safe to do that? How am I going to achieve that? And when I found that I was, it was second nature on how I was going to pose a baby, okay, well, I'm going to try something a bit deeper. I'm going to try something a little bit, just different. But starting basic is actually what I would super recommend if you're just starting, especially with your newborn photography. Get a doll. Start practicing wraps on dolls. Start practicing posing. I know a baby's not the same, but it's going to start giving you hands-on experience with all the concepts and what you need to actually look at when you're doing it. And again, in my top tips, I'm going to do a bit of a run through on that kind of stuff. But I won't go too much today because otherwise I'll talk for ages on that and not props. Little things like these props. So this is a mini version of the crate that I was telling you about earlier. So this one, baby's propped very differently because if you look here, like it's actually not super big. So baby is always propped more on in the corner kind of position. So basically what that means is making sure that this area here is just essentially, this generally doesn't even show. This is just well propped up and covered with whatever texture. So let's just say we're going to go something like this. So it just becomes baby's upright more as opposed to flat in a prop. Baby's upright, head supported well, and gives you that nice, this kind of angle for props. This makes a awesome prop for my sitter sessions and little family sessions because it's actually a very, very sturdy prop. So it makes a great little stool because it's not very high off the ground, which means little ones can sit on it confidently. So I find that this one's probably used more for my sitters and things like that than newborns. But again, still use it. Some parents absolutely love the nice rusticy wood sort of look, so it still definitely gets used. Bed props, I have several different ones, but I've just got one to show you today. So this is beautiful little bed. Now these ones are from prop vendors. I actually started when I first had my very first bed. I remember being at IKEA and seeing their little brown wooden beds, and I lost my mind because I went, oh my God, that's a little tiny bed and that is big enough to fit a newborn in. I reinforced the base of it because the base in the IKEA one is like this thin. So I reinforced it and I used that for probably a year or two, maybe even longer, before I gave it to my daughters for their dolls and bought different props. Moving into this house with my big storeroom meant I finally expanded quite significantly in my props. So I actually have lots and lots of beautiful props to use now. So again, looking at props through vendors, generally they've done the hard work and they've sourced what's usable, what's not. If you're already in the photography world with newborns, you'll know that there's lots of in props and what most are using, and that kind of guides, I guess, what I try sometimes and what I look for. Looking in this, again, I look at the length. So baby's head's going to be up a little bit. This is also a beautiful one for baby to be laying on their belly and having their face sort of at the end of the bed here. And again, same concept for every prop I use. I always have some kind of texture and something that will be wrapped up to support head. And when you're photographing, I always love to have the angle where your face is your main focus, unless you're doing details of hands and feet. So basically it's head, and then body is in the lesser foreground. So propping baby's head up and closer to the camera is actually ideal anyway. So I would create a nice little headrest, and then let's say this is probably my most commonly used one. Doesn't need a whole lot because this is quite thick. And then baby just nestles beautifully in the prop. That's probably it in terms of like my solid props. I thought I'd give a couple of little tips with what I use for accessory wise that go hand in hand with most of my props. So I've got a couple little things just to show you that, you know, to add a little bit more to my props. I have about 1 billion headbands because they're just adorable and there's so many different ones. So you can see things like this, stretchy and in a knot. What that means is if you've got really different size baby heads, you've got the ability to just pull through and make it bigger or smaller, and they're all incredibly soft. None of the little decals on top touch baby. It's always got a headband base. So love them, absolutely love them. Little things like these, own lots of these. Just little hand props, make really cute additions to your photos. Not necessary, but they're cute. And teddies. Lots of different sizes, but essentially when I look for them, I look for thin enough that a baby's little hand can be around them and it's not drowning the baby out, or too small that you don't see it, I guess. Headpieces, I always pick something that's got lots of stretch because babies have many different size heads. So going something like these allows plenty of use with different babies. Outfits, I normally get all of mine from vendors. Every now and then I'll see something super cute in a store and I'll get it just generally in just a newborn size. I do have a few things in the studio that are for tiny babies, so that if you have a baby that was born prem and even though you've waited longer for their session, they're still quite small. So sometimes even my newborn size things can be a little bit big. And then I have a couple of things that are a little bit more generous. And generally when I talk to parents, I ask, how big was baby? And then we sort of go from there. I know what outfits will and won't fit the baby. And these ones come with their cute headpieces. And generally starting out, just pick something boy, something girly, and a few neutral. And then you can just build upon that at your own pace, really. Stretchy wraps. Lots of stretchy wraps. Lots and lots and lots and lots of stretch in them. So basically, anytime I wrap a baby, I'll double layer. So what I'll do is I'll use a stretchy wrap. And if you watch my video on part 1, which is just talking about basic wrapping, you'll see that I pop baby in a stretchy wrap first, gets baby into place, and then you can add something, you know, with a bit more texture for the more decorative wrap that you're actually going to photograph. So baby that I photographed in the video last week, you can see nice knitted wrap with a stretchy underneath. What that also means is if you plan on doing a couple of different wrap shots, you can just take off your top layer and add another top layer without even waking the baby in most cases. And then just, again, lots of different textures. And then having complementary, stretchy and decorative works beautifully. And then just bringing all your elements together, photographing them as you please. And then these little guys are a huge lifesaver. So when I use my bean bag, I want my bean bag to be nice and tight. So generally, let's see if I can show you my bean bag over there. So generally when I'm using that, I want it to be pulled really tight. Now my bean bag is a little bit deflated and getting a bit old. So I use these guys and just really pull the blankets down to clip them in. I think I'll leave it at that, only because I could just talk for hours with lots of different things. So I'm going to leave it at that. If there's something that I missed or didn't share, or there's something you want to know specific about what I did share, just leave a comment and I'll answer those. When I do my next one or two of them, I'll probably talk even more about some of the other like additional things like flooring, blankets, how I pick those, and just a few other accessory type props, because props is obviously a very general, big topic to talk about. But I hope that gave you guys some good information on when you're out and about looking, or if you're just starting. Honestly, start small. Getting confident with your camera and with your clients is your number one key, because you can own a bajillion props and just feel like an absolute mess if you just don't quite know what you're doing. So practicing, starting small, starting basic, like I said, something round, something square, and just start. Start with wrapping on a doll, get confident with how to wrap. A doll's not the same as a baby, no, but it has 2 arms, 2 legs, a body and a head. You can make a start. Thanks heaps for tuning in, and I look forward to our next. Enjoy the beautiful sunshine if you're here in Adelaide, and I'll talk soon. See you guys.